Tracy Sable tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Pilgrimage of Peace. The Holy See announces where the Holy Father travels next. We have a report from Rome. Enduring friendship. President Joe Biden renews ties with America's oldest ally amid differences. We're at the White House. Twitter turmoil. Elon Musk gets under the skin of Apple. We'll explain. And City of David, preparing for Christmas at the birthplace of our Savior. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks for being with us tonight. Our top story tonight, Pope Francis is set to make his much anticipated visit to Africa. The Holy See announced today that at the end of January and into early February, the Holy Father will travel to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and to South Sudan. The trip was originally scheduled for last July, but the Vatican postponed it because of the Holy Father's knee issues. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Tannhauser has more on today's announcement and the excitement surrounding it.
And the Holy Father will first visit the Democratic Republic of Congo and its capital, Kinshasa. There, he will see the president of the republic, named Felix Tshisekedi, and then meet with the authorities, civil society, and the diplomatic corps. The next day, on February the 1st, right in the morning, he will celebrate a Holy Mass at the city's airport. On February the 3rd, Pope Francis will go to South Sudan. In the capital city of Juba, he will meet with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby of the Anglican Church, and the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, which is Jim Wallace. On February the 5th, the day of his departure, before the farewell ceremony and before he's returning to the Vatican, he will celebrate another Mass with the faithful there. The motto of the visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo is "All reconciled in Jesus Christ." And the logo shows the Pope at the center of a map of the country featuring the colors of the flag. The phrase chosen as the motto for the trip to South Sudan is taken from the Gospel of John. "I pray they all may be one." The logo contains the dove, the outlines of the map of South Sudan with the colors of the flag, the cross, and two hands clasping. These mottos are focused on the topic of peace, of course, and something that both war-torn countries are very much in need of. The papal trip is also in line with the philosophy of this pontificate to bring Jesus Christ to the peripheries of our modern world. EWTN will of course cover this important journey and then be right there when Pope Francis prays with the faithful in Africa. In Rome, Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN News Nightly.
In Hong Kong, there is a delay in the trial against Catholic businessman Jimmy Lai. Hong Kong's leader wants to block a British attorney from defending the former newspaper publisher. Lai, a pro-democracy advocate, faces charges under a Beijing-backed national security law. If convicted, he could face life in prison. President Joe Biden hosts his first state visit today. He is welcoming French President Emmanuel Macron to the White House. The international event brings together the U.S. and its oldest ally, but the two countries still squabble over differences. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Good evening to you, Tracy. I was on the South Lawn this morning when the two presidents reviewed the troops. The grand welcoming ceremony, of course, was all handshakes and smiles, but later the two global leaders got down to business and there was plenty to talk about. The White House hosts an official arrival ceremony for the President of France featuring military music and marching. President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte joined President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden for the first state visit since the COVID-19 pandemic started.
France and the United States are once again defending the democratic values and universal human rights, which are the heart of both our nations.
President Biden praised the enduring friendship between the two countries, then invited President Macron into the Oval Office to begin their formal business, an agenda packed with tricky topics like the war in Ukraine and competition with China.
Things are changing rapidly, really rapidly, and it's really important we stay in close communication.
When we look at our common history, this friendship always prevailed. With quite good results, by the way.
Yes.
The two world leaders also addressed the media.
I think it's absolutely critical what Emmanuel said. We must support the Ukrainian people. The idea that Putin is ever going to defeat Ukraine is beyond comprehension.
The U.S. and France still have unresolved issues. President Macron criticized the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act during a speech Wednesday at the French embassy.
Au fond, nous voulons aussi bâtir un agenda commun.
President Macron says the U.S. subsidies pose an enormous setback for European companies and could fragment the West. Now, regarding that Inflation Reduction Act that France is worried about, President Biden acknowledged it has some glitches, but he added that it can be tweaked. However, he makes no apologies for the bill, calling it a massive piece of legislation that has hundreds of billions of dollars invested in climate change. Now, tonight, the two world leaders will have a fancy state dinner on the South Lawn. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
More Ukrainians are preparing for more Russian attacks against energy and other key infrastructure. President Biden is asking Congress for an additional $37 billion to aid in that effort. But some lawmakers want to know where all that money is going and how it's being used. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Good evening, Tracy. You know, this new request is on top of the $68 billion that's already been allocated for Ukraine. Some Republicans, led by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, are sponsoring a resolution demanding an audit.
If Congress votes this down, guess what the message will be to the American people? It will be, you don't get to find out what's happening with your money. They'll be telling the American people no.
Others want to stop the aid entirely.
The days of endless cash and military materiel to Ukraine are numbered. They're numbered in the days that are required to act on Congresswoman Greene's well-thought-out resolution of inquiry, and they are numbered when we get into the majority.
But top Republicans in both chambers say the GOP will continue to fund and arm Ukraine. As a matter of fact, a group of 16 bipartisan senators, led by Republican veteran Senator Joni Ernst, wrote the Biden administration recommending they immediately send advanced armed drones to Ukraine, like these Gray Eagle drones capable of firing missiles. In their words, quote, to drive the strategic course of the war in Ukraine's favor. Last month, Ukrainian leaders had asked for these weapons, but the Pentagon said no. Both sides do agree current monitoring efforts are inadequate. Records show the Biden administration has inspected only 10% of the 22,000 weapons sent to Ukraine between February and November 1st. Senator Bill Cassidy tells me Ukraine aid is a good deal.
This has served Americans' interests tremendously. Is it expensive? Yes, it is. I don't minimize that. At the same time, would it be more expensive to not do this? Absolutely. If we don't do this, if we had not done this, Russia would not have stopped in Ukraine.
In other news, we have an update from the Senate floor. It appears that a nationwide rail strike that was supposed to happen on October 9th has been averted. The Senate voted in favor to impose a tentative agreement between workers and management. It's the same agreement that passed the House yesterday, but senators failed to adopt a provision giving workers 7 days of paid sick leave. The president is expected to sign this agreement soon. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Social media giant Twitter is scrapping policies against so-called coronavirus misinformation. Previously, tweets against COVID vaccines and other content were either flagged or removed from the social media side. It is just the latest pivot since Elon Musk took control of the company a month ago, igniting a firestorm of dissent all the way up to the White House. And joining us tonight to discuss is Mike Davis, president of the Internet Accountability Project. Mike, always great to have you on. A lot to get to today. But first, I want to start off with the removal of the COVID policies. Before Musk took the reins at Twitter, thousands of accounts were suspended over so-called misinformation regarding the vaccines and COVID. Meanwhile, today, we are finding out that some of what was deemed misinformation a few years ago really wasn't misinformation at all. Your thoughts?
Yeah, how many thousands, tens of thousands of people unnecessarily suffered and died because big tech colluded with the Biden White House and big media to censor, silence, deplatform, and cancel doctors, scientists, policymakers like a medical doctor. Senator Rand Paul was kicked off of YouTube because he contradicted Tony Fauci. We can't, in America, we have free speech. We have the scientific method. We want doctors and scientists and policymakers to debate so we can continue to further science. This is the most anti-science, illiberal thing you can do, to censor scientists and doctors and policymakers. So I'm glad that Elon Musk is finally ending this nonsense about this cancellation nonsense.
Yeah, and something else that turns out was not misinformation, the Hunter Biden laptop story that was suppressed on Twitter before the 2020 presidential election. Musk says that he plans to reveal all that information about why Twitter did that so as to restore public trust. Your take, Mike?
Yeah, they absolutely need to get to the bottom of this, because that swung the last election, that swung the 2020 election for President Biden. If the American people would have known what was on that laptop based upon the New York Post reporting that was censored by big tech, there's no way that President Biden would be the president today. They need to get this information out there right now. There is smoking gun evidence that President Biden, his son Hunter, and President Biden's brother James are on the Chinese and Ukrainian payrolls, and there needs to be Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed a special counsel to investigate non-crimes on Trump for having classified records at Mar-a-Lago, which he's allowed to do under the Presidential Records Act. Garland needs to appoint a special counsel to investigate this laptop, including the obvious smoking gun evidence of foreign corruption of the President of the United States, his boss.
Also, I want to talk about Janet Yellen. Treasury Secretary said an investigation into Musk's purchase of Twitter is not off the table. This as the White House admits they're keeping a close eye on Twitter. In fact, this is what Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said earlier this week. Let's take a listen.
We're all keeping a close eye on this. We're all monitoring what's currently occurring, and we see it with our own eyes of what you all are reporting, and just for ourselves, what's happening on Twitter.
Mike, your reaction to this?
It is a clear First Amendment violation for government to punish Twitter for their speech, and it cannot happen. With Janet Yellen, if she's going to go after Twitter, why hasn't she gone against TikTok, which is Chinese-controlled, Chinese influence, and they're going to go after Twitter, and they're going to ignore TikTok? Maybe it's because President Biden was on the Chinese payroll.
Another thing I want to touch on is Elon Musk and Apple CEO Tim Cook. Apparently, they met yesterday. Tell us what that was all about.
Yeah, they met because apparently Apple is threatening to kick Twitter out of the App Store duopoly, just like Google and Apple kicked Parler out of the App Store duopoly, and Amazon kicked Parler off the internet. This is why we must update and enforce our century-old antitrust laws. There is a rare, closing, bipartisan opportunity for the Democrats and the Republicans in the House and the Senate to update these laws. There are 6 bills working their way through the House and the Senate that will end big tech's gatekeeping power over information and commerce. We cannot. This is a tactical retreat by Apple. They realize they felt the public heat. They're backing away. But we cannot live in a country where at a moment's notice, a $2 trillion company, Apple, and 2 $1 trillion companies, Google and Amazon, can kick Twitter off the internet just like that.
Mike, we have probably about a minute left or so, but I'm wondering what else you're following.
There is a lot going on. I think this big tech fight is so important. I think that Republicans in the House of Representatives, these House Republican leaders, talk a big game about going after big tech, but they take a lot of big tech's money and they do their bidding. If Kevin McCarthy wants to secure the votes to become Speaker of the House, he should support these 6 key bipartisan antitrust reforms to hold big tech accountable. It's theIAP.org/war room, and your viewers can go look at those now.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. Always great to get your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including our coverage of the exploitation of children and more reaction to disturbing ads by a big-name fashion brand. Plus, how faith leaders in Europe are stressing a message of unity. Thanks Thanks for staying with us. The saga surrounding luxury brand Balenciaga continues to unravel after a recent ad campaign featuring young children surrounded by grotesque sexual symbols. The designer claims they had no knowledge of the ads and quickly scrubbed them from their website. In addition to images of kids, ads also showcased a copy of a Supreme Court case involving child pornography. And with us in our studio tonight is Catholic News Agency political correspondent Edie Heipel, who wrote an article about this for CNA. Edie, great to see you.
Great to see you too.
You know, a lot seems to be coming out every day about this ad campaign, but there's also a lot not being said, in particular by celebrities who either represent the brand or who wear it. Why do you think that is?
I think it's obvious that some of these celebrities have a lot to gain from not speaking out. I mean, clearly this is part of a market that benefits off of sexually exploiting children, and it's a moneymaker for these people, just like transgender surgeries on children are a moneymaker. So I think a lot of these people who are connected with this scandal are worried about speaking out and what that's going to cost them financially.
Yeah, and I understand that Vice President Kamala Harris, her stepdaughter, is actually a model for this brand, for Balenciaga. Have we heard anything from Harris or the White House about these ads?
Obviously not. I mean, you know just as well as I have that the media, really the mainstream media, and definitely our leaders of our nation in the top positions of power have really done nothing to talk about this story, to talk about how scandalizing it is. And really, I think you see the connection here between these people don't care. They don't care about children. If they think it's fine to mutilate children's bodies, if they believe that abortion is a sacrament, and if an innocent child's life is really worth nothing to them, they're not going to talk about this.
Yeah, and it's more than disturbing. Something else really, really disturbing. I mean, we talked about the sexually explicit images in the ads, but it's not just that. I mean, there are images that are satanic, that are demonic. There's one particular ad, there's a little boy, looks like he's in a playroom. I don't believe we have that image to show right now, but he's in a playroom. Behind him is some scribblings of what looks like Satan. And then there is a roll of tape that says Balenciaga, but it says B-A-A-L, as in ball. Let's talk about that.
Right. A lot of people have pointed out the subtle imagery that it's just so glaring when you see the references to Satan. And honestly, I think it actually fits perfectly well, the connection with Satanism and satanic imagery with exploiting children. I mean, what could be a clearer connection than that? And so I think it's really, you know, shocking to see that in these images, but it really actually fits quite well when you see what's going on.
Yeah, kind of hiding in plain sight for a lot of people to see. Yes. And it's not just the ads. Apparently, a lead stylist for Balenciaga, she has a really disturbing past as well, and probably present. Talk about what has been on her social media sites.
Right. Well, their lead stylist, Volkova is her last name. In the past week, she's deleted over nearly hundreds of old Instagram pictures and made her Instagram completely private. And what you see, thanks to the work of people like Ollie London and others who've screenshotted these images and shared them, you see disturbing artwork of children who are beaten, tied up, just really things that we're not even really able to talk about on air because it's so horrific. So really, it's what Balenciaga's done is not just the photo shoot, but it extends way beyond that. It goes into their past and really the framework of who they are as a brand. And frankly, many of these top brands and people who are colluding to have such a disgusting agenda.
Absolutely. We are almost out of time, but this is all kind of disturbing to talk about, but it's important to talk about as well. What can we do? What can we do about this?
I think, speaking out and holding people accountable, we saw this week, the same week that the scandal has gone on, the Washington Post put out an article praising a play about pedophilia.
I saw that.
So we need to start drawing those connections, forcing that into the public and really adults. It's on adults to fight for children, innocent children who are being used in this way. And there's no excuse from Democrats, from Republicans, from anybody in a position of power, any position less than that, frankly, to say something.
Absolutely. And it seems like they're trying to mainstream this, almost make it normal, pedophilia.
They are. And there's been a growing academic movement, as I'm sure you're aware of, in the past 10 years, to normalize pedophilia by renaming it to minor attracted persons and trying to lend, a guise of sympathy for these people when really no, we need to call this out for what it is. It is evil, it's disgusting, and there's no excuse for it.
There's no excuse for it, but it's hard to talk about it. It's good that we talk about it because we have to protect our children.
It's true, yeah.
Edie, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for following this. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And there's still a lot more to come here on EWTN News Nightly. It is the season of Christmas lights. How workers are preparing at the original nativity site in Bethlehem, plus a special milestone for the national Christmas tree near the White House. Tonight with a two-day meeting to discuss the church in Europe and its future. Catholic leaders from Europe gathered in Belgium to analyze the situation of the faithful across the continent in this complicated time. Joining us now from Belgium is Dr. Valerie Duval-Pouillon, Conference of European Churches Governing Board member. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Can you tell us more about this meeting and what was on the agenda?
We had really a great meeting. You know, it's between CEC, the Conference of European Churches, representing Orthodox, Protestant, and Anglicans of Europe, you know, leaders. And on the other side, the Conference of European Bishops, so bishops representing different countries in Europe. So it was a spiritual encounter where we had the chance to explore the challenges that happen in Europe at the moment. And, well, God knows we have so many challenges, especially with the war in Ukraine. So we had these 2 days together to pray together, to listen to the Bible, and to share with experts as well, to share about the situation. So we took a lot of time about Ukraine, for instance, but also to share news of our different churches. And we had an excellent time talking about the synodal path that the Catholic Church is going at the moment, because it's probably one of the most exciting events for the Catholic Church since Vatican II. So we wanted to take time to listen to each other, to understand what the other church is going through, to be real brothers and sisters together.
And for those who may not be familiar, would you mind telling us about the committee and some of the work it does?
Yes, our committee is trying to be the Christian voice in Europe, because Christianity in Europe is very diverse, with Orthodox, Anglican, Protestants, with all the diversity of Protestant and Catholics. So we try to have the leaders of these different churches sitting together around the table and discussing together what they could do. So, for instance, recently they made a strong statement on the war in Ukraine to condemn any instrumentalization, saying that we cannot pretend it's any spiritual war, and to defend our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. So it's also about gathering Christians every 5 or 10 years, thousands of them in Europe, organizing convention where we can meet, pray, and think together about Christianity in Europe.
And before I let you go, can you talk to us about the situation for the church in Europe? I know in a recent interview you referred to it as a great period of crisis. Can you explain what you meant?
Yes, as many people around the world, we are going crisis through crisis, like the climate crisis, but also more specifically in Europe, the fact that we have secularization, and we really need to be witness of hope for people around us who do not believe anymore with the sexual abuses in the church and that are disappointed. And together we want to stand and show unity, because this is a way we will show God's love.
Absolutely. And Doctor, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. We appreciate it. Well, Christmas is around the corner, and in Bethlehem, local craftsmen are preparing. Nativity scene figures are being carved from olive wood to sell at markets. Many tourists and pilgrims are expected to visit the Church of the Nativity, built on the site where it is believed that Jesus Christ was born. Finally tonight, this year marks the 100th anniversary of the lighting of the national Christmas tree near the White House.
3, 2, 1, here we go! Yeah, okay!
Several top musical artists joined President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden at yesterday's ceremony. The Vice President and Second Gentleman also attended. The national Christmas tree site is open to the public through New Year's Day. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.